Hello students. So, in the series of discussion on Delhi current affairs, so we are going to discuss the most important topics that were given through our publications on 8th and that were discussed on 9th of March. So, the major issues of today that we are going to discuss. So, you see the first one is the international section, the expansion of NATO. You see since few months NATO is in news and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has brought this organization to more international focus. Fine, because whether NATO will support Ukraine or not, whether Russia will be able to face the combined strength of NATO in case NATO came to the rescue of Ukraine. That was the major topic of hot discussion around the world. Every country around the world who are concerned and who are aware of the developments going on are very much aware about the organization called NATO. And why NATO? What is NATO? Why it was established? What it has done over the years? And how it has changed the security scenario in the world. So, in the first topic we will be discussing that. So, coming to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The recent Russian attack on Ukraine has brought this organization to again international ramification or international news. So, the expansion of NATO threatened at some undefined points the future to allow Ukraine to join the group as a treaty ally, thus bringing a transatlantic security coalition within striking distance of Russia's western border. You see, eastward march of NATO is the topic, because NATO's background that we are going to discuss in this topic. NATO as a military alliance created in the post Second World War period. So, what is NATO? So, it is a military alliance established by the North Atlantic Treaty. So, as the name says, established by the North Atlantic Treaty, also called the Washington Treaty, which was signed in April 1949 by the United States, Canada and several Western European nations to provide collective security against Soviet Union. So, what the next term is? To provide collective security. So, it was created as a military alliance and by the Treaty of North Atlantic Treaty or the Washington Treaty of 1949, and it was created to provide collective security against the then USSR or Soviet Union, as the name was before the disintegration in 1991. There are currently 30 member states or countries, and North Macedonia becoming the latest member to join this alliance in 2020. That means NATO at present has 30 members and North Macedonia is the latest member in this grouping. So, origin of NATO, let us have a brief background about this military alliance. The self-declared mission of NATO when it emerged in 1949 was for the objective for which it was created, deterring Soviet expansion. So, let us have a brief background. In the post Second World War period, the world was polarized in two power blocks, one led by the USA. So, one block led by USA, the second block led by USSR. So, this is the capitalist block and this is the socialist block. Fine. And in between, the other development was hundreds of countries became independent in Asia, Africa and Latin America, and these are infant nations. So, in need of everything from basic financial support to food support to military technology, everything they need. And these two power blocks emerged in the world, dividing the world into two different parts. One, the capitalist block in a free economy, so led by USA, and the other side a socialist block led by USSR with a state controlled or regulated economy. And this period also witnessed another development which was known as Cold War. known as Cold War. So, what is this Cold War? Cold War is a phase of intense armament built up. That means countries or these two power blocks, they started building huge armaments, sophisticated weapons and armory was added to their stock to show their domination or superiority to the other side. That means both the sides, one side led by USSR and the other side led by USA, they go on a massive armament built up without resorting to war. So, that is why it is called a Cold War, phase of Cold War. Cold War in history is known as a phase of intense armament built up without resorting to direct war. So, in this process of Cold War, so both the power blocks, they started acquiring, developing and stockpiling huge armaments, sophisticated weapons and armaments. And during the same period also, they started developing military alliance, because they realized unity can give them strength, and if they are militarily united, that strength will pose them as much safer and much credible before the other side. So, that is why NATO was created. So, during this period, so what the objective of NATO? So, deterring Soviet expansion, because why this expansion? Soviet Union along with USA also want expansion of communism around the world and bring more and more country under its umbrella. Okay. So, forbidding the revival of nationalist militant in Europe through a strong North American presence in the continent. Second World War was the means the outcome of this nationalist militarism, which militant that developed in Eastern Europe, through the in the First World War period, that led to the Second World War. So, what happened? So, America also intended that this development is not again being repeated in the global scenario. Then encouraging European political integration. So, through this military alliance, so this group want that there should be an European integration. Clearly, the legacy of Nazi affiliation and World War II acted heavily on the minds of founding members of NATO, because you know, so this Nazi Germany, so was the major culprit of Second World War. So, how to checkmate such development in future? So, to save mankind from another war. So, and to maintain the hegemony of the American led Western group in the post Second World War period was the major idea behind creating this organization called NATO. Fine. Although NATO claims that it is only partially true, that it's very creative as to counter the threat from the Soviet Union, which was a strong emphasis on military cooperation and collective defense in its clauses. That means, so to checkmate USSR, this NATO was created, and through military, so what they intend to do? Through military cooperation and collective defense. So, they want to expand this, made them strong, their group stronger. For example, Article 5 of the treaty proclaimed that an armed attack against one or more NATO member country shall be considered as an attack against them all, and that following such an attack, each member of this group would take such action as it deemed necessary, including use of armed forces in its response. That means, the simple principle is of NATO that follow was attack on one, attack on one, each attack on all. That means, if any non-NATO member ever dare to attack any NATO member country, then the entire NATO group will decide to take military action combinedly against it. The simple principle is attack on one will be considered as attack on all, and the NATO group as a whole will start its military action against that country which has attacked one of the NATO member country. So, with this objective, this military organization was created. Fine. So, moving further, the broader content at this time was that in 1955, a time when the Cold War was gaining momentum. Cold War, as I told you, so a period of intense armament built up, so huge stockpiling of weapons including nuclear weapons, conventional weapons, sophisticated weapons, and the Soviet Union signed a Socialist Republic Central and Eastern European to the Warsaw Group. So, as a counter to NATO, the USSR also developed its military alliance, which was known as Warsaw. It is another military alliance led by USSR. So, for information, you see, if NATO is led by USA. Similarly, the Warsaw was led by USSR. So, two different military blocs, one is NATO, one is Warsaw. So, they were created parallelly to counter each other. That means, so these two power blocs leaders, they want to attract more and more countries under their security umbrella. So, they have established the American led NATO and the USSR led Warsaw, two big military the security umbrellas, and they try to attract these newly independent countries to their fold. So, in a wider military cooperation and security coordination, that is what. The pact, essentially a political military alliance, was viewed as a direct strategic counterweight to NATO, as we explain it. So, Warsaw, this Warsaw was created, see this group military alliance was created as a counter to NATO of USA. That means, NATO versus Warsaw. This is by USA and this was led by USSR. Okay. It focused at that time was the fact that while East Germany was still part of Soviet occupied territory of Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany has joined NATO by May 1955. That means, in the second order period, Germany was divided into East and West Germany. East Germany remained under the control of USSR and West Germany became a capitalist country, and in between was the Berlin Wall. Fine. So, great divide created by man. Okay. So, one country divided into two for making it weaker. So, the Third World War is somehow ruled out. Fine. So, in this process, when East Germany became an ally of Warsaw led USSR led Warsaw Group, the West Germany joined the NATO alliance led by USA. As unified multilateral political military alliance, Warsaw Pact was aimed at tying East European capital more closer to USSR. They want that this Warsaw Group, they want that East European capitals must be close to USSR. So, military cooperation, security umbrella and wider economic cooperation. So, and ideological affinity, these all are to be combined. So, two different blocs emerge in the world, one led by the USA and the military alliance will be NATO, one led by USSR and the military alliance will be Warsaw. This was the situation when this NATO emerged, and the counter to NATO, this Warsaw Group was also emerged in the global context. Indeed, the pact even gave the Soviet Union the option to contain civil uprising and dissent across the Europe satellite states, including Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, etc. That all that began to unravel by the late 80s when the sheer downward pressure of inevitable economic slowdown in most East European countries. Allies reduced the potential for military cooperation to make any real difference strategically across the region. That means, so there are two groups ideologically different, one the capitalist bloc led by USA and their military alliance was NATO. The second is socialist bloc, the control economy, regular economy led by USSR, their military alliance was Warsaw. But Warsaw Group country were no way economically that flourishing in comparison to the military alliance led by NATO group or the capitalist bloc. So, Warsaw as a military alliance became weaker because the country's economy was in doldrum, because economy may lead to more defense development, because economy in those countries were not developing at that fast, they are going through economic crisis or imbalance economic development. That led to this group becoming not that proactive as compared to the NATO group, because their economic development facilitated their military development, security pact, and more strong unity in the economy as well in the defense arena. So, that is what the Warsaw Pact is officially disbanded in the early 1991 after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. You know, the alliance or the military alliance led by USSR came to an end when USSR itself disintegrated, and the big development came in the global scenario in 1991 when, so coming on international disturbances, internal disturbances, the Soviet Union or the USSR disintegrated. Okay, as the USSR disintegrated, so Warsaw as a military alliance, so has its demise also, that is quite natural. Okay, in this scenario, so NATO became the only military alliance, and its prospect, its relevance and its importance, so it was increased. So, that led to NATO becoming more proactive and NATO becoming so more potent in the next period. Expansion carried out by NATO in the next page, because with the demise of disintegration of USSR and demise of Warsaw, NATO remained as the only military alliance globally. So, definitely it was boosted because its counterweight or its opponent, the opponent alliance called the Warsaw, was nowhere in the picture. It has a unceremonious demise. So, NATO became very proactive, and even as the Soviet Union dissolved into Russia and former Soviet republics, you know, once the Soviet Union or USSR disintegrated, a number of Soviet republics emerged in the scenario. Okay. But during that period, the financial instability in Russia, the succession, and even these republic or newly created republics, so they are unable to think of their security more, because they are fighting with their economic condition inside the country. Okay. So, this led that the Warsaw to demise and Russia not to be that proactive militarily for the nearly 2 decades from 1991 until 2000, fine, for nearly 2 decades, because Russia was managing its own economy in a very precarious way, and so also all the Soviet republics, they were also having the same problem. After and in this same period, some other development took, like Germany unified by the dismantling of the Berlin Wall, both the East and West Germany, they united, fine, and they tried to be close with NATO. Then similarly other like Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, so they joined the NATO group, because so they are all former somehow close to USSR, but right now in the post disintegration period, they feel it wiser to be in the capitalist bloc and the NATO military alliance. In 2009, Albania and Croatia signed. In 2017, Montenegro entered the bloc, and 2020 it was North Macedonia. That means it was an eastward march of NATO that started in the post USSR disintegration period. So, what it is called? So, this is popularly called as the eastward march of NATO. What it is called? Eastward march of NATO. That means the NATO, which was a military alliance, the Western countries led by USA, started its march towards the Eastern country who were under the USSR or Russian Federation earlier. So, this is popularly called as the eastward march of NATO. So, NATO as a military alliance was created for the Western countries, but in the post USSR disintegration period, so NATO started its march as a military alliance, including some Eastern Bloc countries under its fold. Okay. So, moving further, you can check. So, why Russia is so sensitive to NATO's expansion? You know, Warsaw as a group is has its demise. So, Russia was the successor of USSR, but for the next 2 decades of disintegration from 1991 till 2000, it was in completely disorder, financially much dependent, even dependent upon the western countries like USA for financial support. So that period was more concerned about the economy than about the security, strategic issues, etc. But when Russia became slightly economically well off from the 2000 onward due to the discovery of oil and gas in the Siberian region. So Russia became, so 2006 onward Russia became financially sound, okay, and it tried to get back its lost position internationally, fine. So in this situation, so when NATO in this period of 1991 till 2005-6, so many country take it at 2010 for nearly 2 decades, many East European countries who were under the USSR, okay, so they have joined NATO, and it was a big threat to Russia, and Russia realized it once it become free from its own internal disturbances as well as its economic downward movement. So when it was recovered, it economically became little well off, it started realizing this. So in 2008, in the week leading to NATO's Bucharest conference, NATO allies welcomed Ukraine and Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations for membership and agreed that these countries will become members of NATO. That means NATO group, they try to add directly the immediate neighbors of Russia to their fold. They went on to announce a period of intensive engagement with both countries at a high political level to address the questions still outstanding regarding their membership association and membership action plan. That means, so Ukraine and Georgia, 2 former USSR states which became independent republic in subsequent period. So they are attracted by NATO, and NATO somehow give a signal to them that in recent future they will be given full-fledged membership of NATO, and this set up alarm bell in Russia because so NATO, the western led or USA led military alliance, will be reaching Russian border. So and as you know, NATO's principle, attack on one is attack on all. So the enemy taking influence over its neighborhood by this military alliance was unbearable for Russia. This set alarm bell for Russia because even the very concept of Ukraine, a nation considered to hold strong historic ties first with Soviet Union, was against Russia's belief that Ukraine, a country like Ukraine, will go and join NATO. It was not digested well by Russia, the successor of USSR. This development promoted Russia to warn USA that no Russian leader should stand idly by in face of step towards NATO's membership for Ukraine. That would be a holistic hostile act towards Russia. This was only among the more recent of a long list of actions by NATO leaders that Russia considers political betrayal, because Russia has warned USA that you do not promote the military alliance of NATO to encourage its republics who were part of it earlier to join NATO. But this development that has taken place by this Bucharest conference was considered by Russia as a betrayal by USA, because USA through this military alliance of NATO is trying to go deep near to the territory of Russia. That is the big issue, fine. So you see, has NATO violated the principle? In 1990, the US informed Russia that there will be no extension of NATO jurisdiction for force of NATO 1 inch to the east. So it was in 1990 that USA promised that NATO will not look towards the east or expand to the eastern region which are control of USSR, but subsequent development has proved it that NATO has make a move or the eastward march of NATO was started. While Russia seized upon its command to fuel its ostensibly outrage at NATO's expansion into the Baltic State region, so it is a fact that in early 90s the locus of diplomacy of the 2+4 including East and West Germany plus USA, France, Soviet Union, United Kingdom agreement was whether a unified Germany could be a part of NATO or not, you know. So this 2+4 as it is called. So who are in this 2+4? This is an informal agreement between two are Eastern Germany and West Germany, because you know before the disintegration of USSR, in that day of Cold War. So, East Germany and West Germany divided, there is a Berlin Wall, East Germany under the socialist control and West Germany the capitalist country, so under American influence, and East Germany under the Russian influence. But so they decided that, so what the future strategy of Germany once it is united. In these 2 plus 4 was East Germany, West Germany plus United States, France, Soviet Union and United Kingdom, they will decide about where Germany will be once it is united. So, the US wanted to reassure Russia that NATO command structure and troop would not be transferred to the territory of the former Germany Democratic Republic. That means, they will not come there to pose a threat to Russia. It was a difficult time for Russia domestically because in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's dissolution, there is a failure to institutionalize democratic practices, a stable market economy and a robust law and order system in the country itself, because the same period from 1990 till 2000, 2010 you can take that way. So, Russia was somehow in somehow internally it is not financially that strong and stable. So, financial instability led to not its hegemonic approach in the global scenario, which was changed in the post or mid 2006 onward, fine. So, this is the background. So, in these circumstances, so what next? So, next come facing all manners of chaos at home, the Russia began to interpret the 2 plus 4 treaty as a ban on NATO's expansion east of Germany. It was taken by Russia that it will not be, it is assurance by the USA, by UK, by that France, so it will not expand to its border. Russia informed the US that it ruled out the option of expanding NATO territory eastward. Though the 2000 Russia carried on this event, speaking with increasing alarm and anger at NATO's steady expansion in Eastern Europe and saying in Munich, Germany that it is obvious that NATO expansion does not have any relation with the modernization of alliance itself or with ensuring security of Europe. On the contrary, it represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust. Fine. So, at one point America promised Russia that NATO will not expand in the eastward direction, and in the practically it was being expanded. So, what was the promise to Russia by USA was not, it was not upheld by it. So, that created a sense of doubt in the mind of Russia, a suspicion mind of Russia. So, this led to what you know. So, in 2008, following NATO announcement of its intent to admit Georgia and Ukraine, 2 former Soviet republics, so who are independent by now. Okay. So, who are the 2? One is Georgia, one is Ukraine. Into its alliance, Russia invaded Georgia, and in 2014 it attacked Ukraine, and in 2014 it has taken Crimea, this one Crimea, and merged it with Russia. Crimea was strategically important for Russia, because during that period Crimea, which is a province in Ukraine, and Ukraine was interested to join NATO as well as have a free trade agreement with the European Union. So, Russian army marched, Russia attacked, Russia created a division inside Ukraine, and the pro-Russian majority part inside Ukraine called the Crimea region, it was taken over by Russia. So, in 2014 war, Russia took over Ukraine, that Crimea part of or province of Ukraine. This is a big setback to Ukraine, but this continue, and Russia somehow proved its mighty that in my region, in my jurisdiction or near my territory, I have the command and I can take any action. So, this was, although international community opposed Russia's action in Ukraine to take away the Crimea region, but Russia never paid attention to global opinion, and so it take away Crimea province from Ukraine. And the present war is the second phase of this, when so it want to take up the entire Ukraine and merge it with Russia, because 2 things. First is the strategic issue. Ukraine being very sharing border with Russia, if Ukraine became a NATO member, so in future, so Russia's security will be threatened because the NATO alliance will be in its border of Russia. Second, the economic aspect, you know, so the economy is more important because Russia is the major supplier of gas and natural gas and oil to other countries, and the economic aspect is there. Ukraine control over Ukraine will facilitate this, because all these gas supplies to Europe, so passes to Ukraine, and that will definitely be safer if Ukraine is joined with Russia. With these two things, the present war is going on. So you see, no one wants the war, but the reality is no one is willing to stop the war. This is the reality. You see, neither the NATO group is adding Ukraine instantly to its membership, but this is pending since 2008 and this is 2022, 14 years they have not given it. And Ukraine has a false impression that NATO will come to my rescue if I am attacked by Russia, but it was not that practically. So the victim was Ukraine, the civilians, the economy, the people of Ukraine, because and Russia decided, let do it and take away Ukraine and merge Ukraine. So first it merged Crimea with it, and right now it want to completely take over Ukraine or establish a pro-Russian government over Ukraine. So the future would only tell that what is going to be the future of Ukraine, whether it will remain as an independent country with a pro-Russian puppet government being installed over there, the number one possibility. Second is that second option, it may be completely merged with Russia as an option. So thereby, so its complete identity is lost. But the first option is more, means possibility is more, that there may be a possibility of a pro-Russian government being established in Ukraine, and Ukraine's desire to be a member of NATO or joining the European Union in a trade agreement will be completely closed for future. That is the option, and with that in view, so Russian president is on a very aggressive mood to attack Ukraine till the present president is killed or out of power. Till that, this war will continue. This is the development in Ukraine and Russia, and why this war is going on, and what is the role of NATO in this situation. Fine, hope that you get some idea about this war. What is NATO? Because NATO is a very important chapter for all exams in future, because it is much in highlight, why it was created, the military alliance, what its role, what its purpose, and what role it has played in the post creation period, even in the post Cold War period. So its role is more wider than during the Cold War period. Fine. So the next topic that we are going to take today is related to this war between Russia and Ukraine, about the human corridor. What is the issue about the human corridor? You see, when war took place in a country, so who are the worst victim? The civilians, because it is the it is a ideological difference, or that difference of interest between the two leaders, two groups in both the countries. But the civilians who are very less concerned, they just want their income, their life, their society, their culture to be saved and live. So they have interrupted, the entire activity get interrupted because of the war. Okay, so during the war, so what happened? So they suffer, they were killed, they are injured, so they suffer, their income come to a drop, and immediate was the life, they are worried for their life. So during that period, when the war is there in a particular area or a particular country, so this human corridor is a condition. What is the human corridor? Russia declared a temporary ceasefire in the Russian-Ukraine war to provide humanitarian corridor for civilians. See, what Russia declared? Humanitarian corridor for civilians. Fine. As the war entered a likely deadliest phase, numerous civilians attempt to leave Ukraine for safety and refugee. There must be humanitarian measures taken to reduce civilian casualty, because you know, when war starts in a country, everyone is worried for the life. When they are worried for the life, the first they will try to leave the war zone or where the war is taking place. So just in apprehension of the life, fear to their life. Okay. So when war is going on, the civilians will try to leave that area, and for that, so there is the need of a humanitarian corridor by which, so no military activity will be permitted there, and that will facilitate passage of civilians in that particular area to the safe places. What is this? What is humanitarian corridor? So they are demilitarized zone, that means no military or armed conflict will be in that zone. In a specific area, for a specific time and both sides of an armed conflict agree to them. That means both the sides, suppose in the present situation both Russia and Ukraine, they will agree that we will create specific period and specific area as humanitarian corridor. During that period, we will not engage any conflict or any attack or counter attack on each other. So, the civilians can use that particular period and that particular area as a passage. The United Nations consider humanitarian corridor to be one of the several possible forms of temporary pause of armed conflict. When the armed conflict is going on or the fighting is going on, so this humanitarian corridor may be created as a pause to a temporary pause for cessation of the hostility or conflict. For example, the large scale bombing of civilian targets, humanitarian corridor can provide crucial relief. Fine. In this particular area and during that particular time, there will be no attack by both the sides in the conflict. So, because both agreed for establishing the humanitarian corridor. Okay. So, moving next. So, what is the need of this humanitarian corridor? The corridor are necessary when cities are under siege and the population is cut off from basic food supplies, electricity and water. The very basic essentials, food, water are not available to the civilians when the war is at its heightened phase. Fine. Then function through these corridors, either food and medical aid can be brought to area of conflict or civilian can be evacuated. 2-3 things can take place. First is, so during the in that humanitarian corridor, they can bring in relief materials, food, medicine supplies or medical supplies, and the second option is civilians may be evacuated through this corridor during that particular period when humanitarian this corridor is declared. Then what is accessibility? So, this corridor is accessed by civilians, not by the military personnel. Okay, military personnel of the military, that the military both the sides agreed that we will not attack that area, we will not create any violence over there, we will not drop bomb over there. The civilians will get a passage and the relief material will be supplied to the civilians because on humanitarian ground. So, accessibility, access to humanitarian corridor is determined by parties to the conflict. So, both the party agree whom to give the access, whether the relief agency, whether for passage of the people. So, what is to be the situation in the ground? It is usually limited to neutral actors. So, normally the humanitarian corridors are allowed for neutral actors, none from both the sides, fine, like the United Nations or the aid organizations such as the Red Cross, who provide humanitarian aid, medical facility and food, etc. They can also be used by even observers, non-governmental organizations and journalists to gain access to contested areas where war crimes are being committed. So, these persons who are neutral, so none involved directly in conflict, can use these humanitarian corridors for access to that particular area. Access to food, access to support, access to medical facility can be provided through this humanitarian corridor. Fine. Then international convention on humanitarian corridor, when it is a situation, so there must be some international conventions relating to this. Even before international organization recognize humanitarian corridor, such as zone where defined in armed conflict including World War II, when Jewish children were evacuated from area under Nazi control to the United Kingdom. It was earlier also during the Second World War. Humanitarian corridor were defined in resolution 45/100 of United Nations General Assembly in 1990. You see, it has been clearly mentioned in the United Nations General Assembly resolution in 1990. So, which has mentioned that what is humanitarian corridor. So, it said that relief corridor are seen by the international community as an important instrument to back up the right of civilians to receive assistance during armed conflict. They are necessary. Then it was recognized Geneva Convention and their additional protocol of 1977. In 1992, the International Institute of Humanitarian Law, you see, this is very important. What? In 1992, the International Institute of Humanitarian Law, so it has defined What is human corridor? The concept more specifically, that means humanitarian assistance can transit. In this case, though the so called humanitarian corridor, which must be respected and protected by relevant authority and if necessary under the authority of the United Nations. So, what did it say? The 1992 International Institute of Humanitarian Law, it has defined what this human corridor is and what activity are permitted within it. So, humanitarian assistance, specifically for humanitarian assistance, can transit through it, okay, and so must be respected and protected by relevant authorities and if necessary under the authority of the United Nations. If required, the humanitarian corridor should be given or should be managed under the United Nations for better credibility or maintain its sanctity in the eye of both the sides. Humanitarian corridors have been frequently used in the Syrian civil war, Libyan civil war and Gaza war among such conflict zones. So, they have been used earlier and this being used earlier, the present discussion is on. So, also in the recent Russia-Ukraine conflict, because many civilians, as we know, many Indians are also stranded over there. So, they are searching for this humanitarian corridor to find the route and find the time when they can be safely evacuated from the area or they can provide it with the relief matters like food, medicine, etc. and even water, which they are right now desperately in need of. Fine. So, moving next, what is the challenge? So, if humanitarian corridor to be created, there are some challenges to it. What are the challenges? The challenges is it is difficult to enforce. Okay, since all sides need to agree to the set of the corridor, humanitarian corridor are difficult to enforce. So, both the sides should agree. They are fighting and both sides are just face to face killing each other to have superiority of the other, okay, hegemony of the other. So, finding consensus by both the sides is really difficult. Fine. There are many war and conflict where calls for civilian corridor or a pause in fighting have been made in vain. Earlier, it has been tried in many instances, but of no result. In the ongoing war in Yemen, for instance, the UN has so far failed in its negotiation, even recent example. So, possible misuse also there, not only difficult to enforce, there is also possibility of misuse. Who will misuse it? There is a risk of military or political abuse. For example, the corridor can be used to smuggle weapons, weapons and fuel into the BC cities, okay, by the government of that particular area. So, that area being declared as humanitarian corridor can be misused by the authority or the power in the state or that particular country to smuggle weapons to the war zones and to take fuels and to the BC cities, that to re-energize it. So, but what is the requirement? So, it is a humanitarian corridor. It is required in the larger interest of humanitarian on human rights or humanitarian values. So, this is what, in addition to humanitarian corridor, the global community should encourage humanitarian pause as a corridor are constructed. A humanitarian pause could involve a temporary cessation. What it is? Look at here. What they want, before this humanitarian corridor is established, they should think of a humanitarian pause, a little pause in the war, okay, and this will involve temporary cessation of fighting to protect civilians, and this will enable civilians to reach the corridor and move through safely. So, this is the most practical or possible possibility seen by the humanitarian groups, that if this is allowed, so the casualty of the civilians can be avoided to a considerable extent. Fine. So, these two topics are related to each other. First is the war, the Nato, and the second one is the humanitarian corridor issue. So, hope that, so the topics have given you brief idea about the two most important topics in discussion, and the third will take up an issue on environment and ecology, about the Great Barrier Reef and the report of IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, on this Great Barrier Reef of corals. Fine. What it is? The report of the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So, what it has given? It in its report, it has that the Great Barrier Reef is in crisis. What? the Great Barrier Reef is in crisis and suffering grave impact from climate change. Great impact on climate change. Which one? This Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral in the world. Okay. The report points to 3 previous mass bleaching events in 2016 to 2022 that caused significant coral loss, and once that there has been mass mortality of some coral species during these 3 mass bleaching period, where massive loss has taken place to the corals. So, this Great Barrier Reef is located in the Pacific Ocean of North Australia. What this report says? Warming ocean temperature. What is? Warming ocean temperature is causing frequent and severe coral bleaching. The worst bleaching event in 2016 affected over 90% of the corals. You see, and punishing sessions of bleaching incident has left the north and middle portion of the reef system in a highly degraded state. That means the biggest coral area is under threat due to climate change and global warming. Fine. So, what it says next? Even if the global community achieves its goal of limiting future warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial area. So, what this? Try to recollect or go back to memory. This 1.5 degrees Celsius reduction in global temperature from pre-industrial time was the agreement at Paris Climate Talk or Paris Climate Conference. Paris Climate Conference 2015. Here the global community agreed that we will try to reduce global temperature by 1.5 degrees centigrade from the pre-industrial level. Even if this is achieved, still the impact on coral will be there. Fine. The ocean warming and marine heat waves will cause the loss and degradation of the tropical shallow coral reefs, leading to widespread destruction of the coral reefs. If bleaching persists, the IPC estimates 10,000 jobs and billions dollar revenue will be lost every year from declining tourism alone. Around 1 billion people worldwide rely on coral reef for their everyday living, which is why a failure is urgently reduce greenhouse gas emission would have devastating effect for humanity. See, the corals are nature's creation, but they give employment and income to millions of people in the world, and tourism is another major area. So, corals attract the tourists. Beyond the reef, climate change will lead to a surge in heat related deaths in the Australia and extinction of certain animal species and more wildfires. So, apart from this coral, so this heat wave will also affect some other species in the world. Okay. So, as has been seen in the past, koalas are at risk of total local extinctions due to increasing drought and rising temperature. A rising sea level and storm surge led to the recent extinction of the rodent species called Barmella K. merlans, which lived in a remote cay in the North Great Barrier Reef. Black summer fires of the late 1990 and early 2020 that killed at least 33 people and destroyed more than 3,000 homes. Even Australia's famed eucalyptus tree, which was naturally resilient to the country's seasonal fire, may not be able to withstand. The report also provides extensive list of climate adaptation strategies such as improving building standards so that homes stay cooler during potentially heat waves. You see, we can build it for humanity. So, we can design the home for us where heat wave may not affect to that an extent, but the living beings staying outside, not human being, others. The universe is not only for us, it is for all others. Fine. What for them? So, they will die out of this heat wave conditions because global temperature is rising, heat waves will be growing and they will be more frequent in future. So, that is a big challenge, and this issue has been well highlighted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its recent report. Then coming to this again back to the barrier reef. So, it is the Great Barrier Reef is the world's most extensive and spectacular coral reef ecosystem composed of over 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands. See its extension. So, 2,900 individual coral reefs and 900 islands. The reef is located in the Coral Sea northeast coast of the coast of Queensland in Australia. It can be seen from the outer space. The world's biggest single structure made by living organism, whom? The corals. World's biggest single structure. Okay. This reef structure is composed of and built by billions teeny organisms known as corals. They have built it. They are made of genetically intended organisms called polyps, which are teeny soft bodied organisms. At their base is a hard protective limestone skeletons called calculi, which form the structure of the coral reefs. These polyps have microscopic algae called zooxanthellae living within their tissues. The corals and algae have a mutualistic or symbiotic relationship. They live on each other. Symbiotic relationship, you know, they live on each other. One support the other. It was selected. Which one? This Great Barrier Reef is a World Heritage or World Natural Site since 1981 by UNESCO. So, this attract huge tourism and it is at threat, and the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued its warning to the global community on the possible damage or destruction of this biggest structure made by living organism, teeny living organism, not human being, by the tiny living organism called the coral polyps. Okay. So, what are the steps taken? A number of global initiatives are being taken to address the issue like International Coral Reef Initiative, Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, Global Coral Reef Alliance, the Global Coral Reef R&D Accelerator Platform, and even in India we have a National Coastal Mission Program. You see, what is the program, the steps taken by the global community at the global level, the International Coral Reef Initiative, the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, the Global Coral Reef Alliance, the Global Coral Reef R&D Accelerator Platforms, and in India it is the National Coral Mission Program launched by Government of India to protect the coral reef, because realizing their importance, their significance for the entire universe, not only for man but for the other who are living in a symbiotic relationship. Okay. So, these steps have been taken with the hope that in future, so they will be protected. Fine. So, their protection will be facilitating the environmental development, and if the unchecked environmental pollutions and heat wave continues, so in future it will have big impact on the corals. And the last stage, this about the flying trainer Hans. We have a Hans trainer aircraft. It is developed indigenous by India, and right now it is Hans NG. Recently Hans NG new generation, a first of its kind indigenously developed aircraft carrier, has completed sea level trial. It is developed by the CSIR National Aerospace Laboratory, not by that DRDO, nor by the that Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, but by CSIR National Aerospace Laboratory. National Aerospace Laboratory, a constituent of the CSIR, established in the year 1959, is the only government aerospace research and development laboratory in the country in the civilian domain. So, research and development laboratory in the country is in the civilian sector. This will be trainer aircraft, not for the defense purpose, but civilian purpose. So, here the pilots will be trained during the learning process of that pilot training process. Council of Scientific and National Research is the largest research and development organization in India, and it has the program, and under it the Council for Scientific and National Research, okay, and under it the National Aerospace Laboratory. National Aerospace Laboratory has developed this Hans trainer aircraft, which will be used as a trainer craft for the pilot training purposes in India, and it has recently it has tested in the sea trial, and that is a big achievement coming to this. What are the features of Hans Okay. The Hans NG or the Hans new generation is one of the most advanced flying trainer. Hans NG is an upgraded version of Hansa which saw the first flight in 1993 and was certified in 2000. The center approved Hans NG in 2018 and null retro modified Hans 3 aircraft with a glass cockpit and got it certified by DGCA, Director General of Civil Aviation. The aircraft was demonstrated at the Aero India show in 2019 which is held at Alhanka, okay, and it is powered by a Rotax digital control engine and designed to meet the need for trainer aircraft by flying clubs in India. You know, we have so many flying clubs who teach flying to the youngsters who are interested to be pilots in future. They are called the flying clubs. Like we have a flying club in Bhubaneswar, the Bhubaneswar Flying Club. It is an ideal aircraft for commercial pilot licensing. So, before the persons were enrolled for commercial pilot licensing to fly the commercial flights. So, they will be trained in this and this will be useful for training the trainee or the pilots in the commercial pilot license process. Fine. So, this is a development because we are not to purchase it from abroad, rather we will have our own trainer aircraft, the Hans new generation, which will be used by the flying clubs to train the pilots. So, who will be, it will be cheaper, it will be its cost is less and the fuel usage is more fuel efficient. So, it will be cheaper for the trainers to get the training in the Hans new generation aircraft. Then coming to some questions per day. Fine. Which article of the Constitution of India safeguards one's right to marry the person of one's choice? It is Article 21, freedom, right equality, right to freedom comes under right equality. Okay. So, it comes under Article 21 under the head right to freedom. Okay. Then moving to the next, consider the following statement about the ISRO's Earth observation satellite. It is a radar imaging satellite capable of providing high quality images under all weather conditions. The satellite has a mission life of 100 years. Okay. So, not 100 years because no satellite has a span of 100 years because satellites are activated by the solar panels and no solar panels can last for this long period. So, this is wrong. So, only one is right. Fine. Coming to 3, the outermost part of sun's atmosphere is called which it is called as? It is called as outermost, it is called the corona. Fine. Then coming to the next, the word modified elephant is sometimes mentioned in that hacking group. Okay, my dear parents, they hack it. So, it is used. So, this is the D is the right answer, A is the right answer. Then coming to the last question, consider the following statement about One Ocean Summit. It was recently organized by Indian Ocean Commission. No, it aims to raise the collective level of ambitions of the international community on marine issues. So, this is the right one. So, B the right answer. So, students, you see, so today we have taken some topics of importance for you. So, and we have given you some ideas about the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, the military alliance of Nato and Warsaw and their significance and the present role of Nato. We have given you the idea about the humanitarian corridor. We have given you the idea about this coral and the coral bleaching and the damage to the corals and the IPCC report on that. We have also given you some idea about the trainer aircraft Hans new generation developed by CSIR, and these will definitely enrich you in your preparation, and hope you will go on watching our daily current affairs discussion sessions to enrich yourself, to make you more confident for the exams that you are going to face in future. Thank you for watching.